Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope that you can hear me, more importantly than seeing me. So I have some slides which I'm hoping that you're able to see, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum once again to all of you. Thank you for that very kind and, if I'm honest, overwhelming introduction. So alhamdulillah, I've been asked to present a little bit about the tools and skills to thrive in academia. The first thing is the nature of the presentation that I'm doing right now might sound to us as Muslims as confessional Muslims. What do I mean by confessional Muslims? I.e., we see everything through the lens of our faith, and we don't separate our faith from other spheres in life. So whether that's to do with education, anything that we do, Islam fundamentally informs our worldview. Having said that, the nature of my presentation today might come across as being very, if you like, secular. That's done because I want you to also understand that academia, especially in universities in the West in particular, but also beyond the West, what we call in the global South, has certain suppositions, which I won't go into today, but there are certain suppositions which any talib ilm or any madrasa graduate or anyone who wants to go and study further should be aware of. And I say this because I get lots of emails from people who are in university or who want to go to university and study at an academic level. I always try and work out the depth and the understanding of Islam, the Sharia, its intellectual traditions, whether it's in the field of philosophy, kalam, mantiq, usul al-fiqh, or fiqh, or whatever else it may be, hadith, whatever. Because you need to be really well-grounded, not only to protect yourself, but also to maximize the benefit that you might want to give to academia. And we're not in academia, I hope, inshallah ta'ala, just so that we can make some money. Not that academia pays really well anyway, but we're not in academia because it's for the financial return, although that will come. It's also to do with representing or presenting our faith to people who might have a different view. Some might be skeptical, some might be lukewarm, and some might be very positive and interested in Islam. So we need to provide a space and provide opportunities and present our faith in the best of ways. So tools and skills to thrive in academia. Some of these tools, they are also transferable to other areas. So even if you're not in academia and you're perhaps writing a book or you're conducting research in your own time, I hope that the presentation today will be useful. The final thing I'll say before I move on is that I will also be bringing in my own personal experience of being in academia. Like most, if not all of you, I've studied at the madrasa, at the Darul Ulum. I still teach at one. I'm heavily involved with one. So I'm involved in these spaces. And so I will be bringing my own experiences out for you, bi'iznillahi ta'ala. And it's not an easy space sometimes to be in because of the Eurocentric nature of academia. So it sees itself as born in European traditions, and it sometimes can see other traditions of less importance or less as a talking tool for modern problems. But I want to show Islam, and I want you to show Islam as a way of life that can help address issues in the world right now, today, using and being rooted in our tradition. So let's begin, inshallah ta'ala. So there's a brief introduction that I have here, which is this, that the pursuit of academic excellence is a journey. And that's really, really important, I think, for all of us alhamdulillah, to be aware of. It is a journey, and it starts as a journey. That's really, really important. And it requires a number of skills. It requires a blend of a number of skills. Number one, or the first among them, is intellectual rigor. So you need to really be, really sharp and be keen on broadening your horizons and learning different perspectives. It also requires practical skills. So it's not just enough that you're academically gifted. That's important, of course, but you also need to have practical skills in terms of managing teams. A lot of work in academia is about projects. It's about being given responsibilities. And so you have to also be really good at managing projects, managing deadlines, ensuring colleagues that you're working with are performing. That's also important. And you also need to have what I would call personal resilience. This is really, really important from my perspective. When you're doing a PhD, for example, it's a long journey, and often it can be quite a lonely journey. Yeah, it can be quite tough for a lot of people, and sometimes people even drop out. That's not to scare you from pursuing academia, but I will say that you do have that challenge. There are also other challenges. You might read things, depending on what you're researching, where you know, or you might feel that it fundamentally is at odds with your religion, your faith, Islam, and there might be ideological underpinnings that you might find that are against what your faith is saying. So then you have to deal with that. Do you read it? Do you not read it? What happens to you when you read it, even? How does it shape the way you think? So some people might shirk at that responsibility and they don't want to do anything to do with it. Others might think, no, I need to know these perspectives, and if I know these perspectives, I can critically engage with them without becoming overruled or overwhelmed by these sciences. And that's quite a danger sometimes, that you can become overwhelmed, overruled. Someone said the slides are not clear. I have it on my computer as a separate screen. They seem to be clear to me. If it's not, let me know. But to me at the moment, the slides seem to be clear. I do apologize if it's not. I did keep it minimum to avoid having too much text on there. But if you want me to send you the slides afterwards, I'm more than happy to do that afterwards. So let's continue. Now, when you're a Muslim, especially when you're a visible Muslim, because you do have Muslims who enter academia, but they're not visible Muslims. In fact, sometimes they hide their Islam. I've seen people do this for whatever reason. It's a quite enriching experience, at least for me, but it can be quite complicated because you're entering spaces which have for centuries been accommodated by mostly white upper class or middle class men. So women are only entering the space now, and when I say women, I mean white women. And then you're talking about brown men or black men entering that space, and you're talking about women with hijabs and scarves entering this space as well. So it can be quite a complex space to be in. And so that's why having a sheikh or a murabbi or even a mentor is very, very useful. I have a number of mentors who've helped me, but at the same time, I still make my own decisions. And then you have the interplay of faith, your own faith, and the faith of others. So you might have colleagues who are Christian and different types of Christian across the entire spectrum of Christianity. You might have Jewish colleagues, again, different spectrums across the spectrum. And you might have people who are of non-faith and people who appreciate religion, although they are not believers themselves. Or you might have people who are totally anti-religion. And so you're entering a space where you have to manage your faith, your identity, and of course the culture. The culture also varies as well, right? The culture in academia is very, very different. For example, we are all aware of the conflict, the ongoing war, if you want to call it that, with Gaza and Palestine and everything else that's going on there. And then you have to, speak out about Palestine in these spaces and these structures which are Eurocentric. They are wedded to colonial structures. So you have to be aware of that, and how do you manage your positionality as a Muslim and a visible Muslim in these spaces. So inshallah, from that perspective, it's also worth bearing those in mind. I'm trying to give you a sense of the complexity, but also the way you can navigate this. So you have to thrive in this environment, And one of the ways you do it is you master the schools of scholarship. So we learn some of this in madrasa. In madrasa, you should be taught how to read kitabs, right? In Arabic, Urdu, Farsi, perhaps, in other languages. You should be pretty fluent in reading these languages, right? But you might not have been taught, for example, how to do intellectual history. So you might be talking about something that you, or a mas'ala, or a certain theological point, and you won't have been trained in terms of, okay, why did this idea even come about? In mantiq, for example, just to give you an example, where did this idea of tasawwur and tasdeeq come about? Right? In madrasas, if they teach you logic, they'll introduce this idea to you very early on if you're studying logic. But what you won't be taught usually is, well, where did this idea come from? Was it from Aristotle? Was it from the Organon? And how did it appear in 𝐬𝐴𝐺𝐲𝐲𝐽? And where is the 𝐬𝐴𝐺𝐲𝐽 coming from? And who decided that it should be split into tasawwur and tasdeeq? For example, I'm just giving an example out to you right now. And was it with Al-Farabi? Was it with Ibn Sina? What did Imam Razi do when he came later on? So these sort of ideas are not really taught to you in madrasas, but in academic spaces, you can get to grips with them. Might not be important to most students, but it's a good tool to have. Or if you're studying Wahdatul Wujud, for example, or Wahdatul Shuhud, which you won't study at madrasa, but you might be studying ontology, you might be studying kalam, you might be studying falsafa. So you can trace these ideas. Who came out with this idea? What was its iterations across time and space? Or, if you're doing fiqh, how did a mazahib come about? How did a particular mas'ala reach the way it reaches today? So these ideas are very, very useful. And they're not always taught in madrasas, at least in my experience. And so you can have this. But also you can learn something very, very important, which is that a lot of what we learn in madrasa, which is gold dust, you have to put it into context with the way human beings are today and civilization is structured today. So you might study the chapter on slavery. How would you explain that to someone today who says, well, in your books, your Quran, your hadith talk about slavery, and there are many, many examples of how usul al-fiqh talk about slavery, for example. So how would you square that? Or how would you explain to someone today that technology, for example, the morning after pill, the pill that you take, not we take, but people take, that stops them getting pregnant, right? And the questions around not just the morality of it, but why was it possible in this particular century? Why was it that people found it was okay to, it wasn't just the fact that we could invent it, it was also because the social cultural conditions made it acceptable. If you did it in Victorian era, people would never allow it. So what does that say about the world that we live in? So you can learn these skills critically and use them to think about how the world is shifting and changing. So I hope this makes sense. I'm still on an introduction slide, so I'm still talking about an introduction. Okay. So the pursuit of ilm, and this is where I talked about this last week. We have this so-called bifurcation or division between dini and dunyawi knowledge. Or some people might use another one, which is religious and secular knowledge. You have these divisions, and I'm hoping to do a course on modernity and secularism and these sort of topics very, very soon with another organization, because I think Muslims need to be familiar with the debates. But we seem to become really engrossed in this debate around dini or dunyawi or secular or non-secular, or religious or non-religious. We have these binaries that we get tied up in knots with. But the point is that the pursuit of knowledge is a core value in Islam. I don't need to tell you that. It's obvious. It's so well known. When I move the slide, I'll tell you. So please don't panic. Just listen to me. Even if you can't see the slides, it doesn't matter. You just need to listen to me and you'll be fine, inshallah. You won't miss anything. Yeah, so there's a question that's come up. I'm not answering all the questions, but I've seen a question by Abdullah Patel. Say if you haven't been taught these subjects, yeah. So a lot of times we're not taught these subjects in madrasa, and it's not a fault of the ulama or our teachers. This is something that you have to learn. the whole point of going to a madrasa is that you're taught to become literate, and you're taught the ability to read. You should have been taught if you had a good madrasa education, and if you combine that with a sense of intellectual curiosity, that you're reading all sorts of books. I don't just read Nizami books. I don't just read, books that you find in Islamic bookshelves. I also visit Islamic studies stores. I also find out what's the latest and try to engage with that writing critically, of course. And I engage critically with Muslim books as well. And so you have to develop that ability and read broadly, whether it's to do with poetry, whether it's to do with philosophy, whether it's to do with quantum mechanics. You have to read these sciences. And wherever you can find time, you try and study these things. So in any case, as Muslims, of course, the Quran tells us, and the tradition of the Prophet ﷺ tell us to do this as well. This is the unique civilizational value of Islam. If you read even non-Muslim Orientalist writing, Franz Rosenthal, in his book, Knowledge Triumphant, dedicates an entire book about ilm, and what made ilm, knowledge, the pursuit of knowledge, so special and unique about Muslims. And so for Muslims, and for me and you, whatever we learn is not just for careers. Often, because in a modern world, people study to get a job. They study dentistry, medicine, A-levels, accounting, generally speaking, because they want to improve their financial circumstances. And to be honest with you, there's nothing wrong with that in of itself, because we need to put food on the table. But the real reason we're doing it is to follow a tradition of intellectual inquiry, right? Reflection, and I would say service to humanity. Muslims had throughout history, they had a focus on service to humanity. In fact, when I teach fiqh, Hanafi fiqh, because that's what I'm trained in, my students will tell you, I also make it very humanistic, in the sense that the fuqaha are really interested in helping people. How do we solve problems? How do we actually help people? And so thriving in modern academic environments requires a lot more than just intellectual curiosity, which I've talked about. You need to be adaptive. You need to have a resilient sense of identity, which I will talk about, because you can sometimes get overwhelmed. I've met many young, gifted ulama and alimas who come, and because they're around people who speak English really well and they've written 5, 6, 7, 10 books, they feel a little bit overwhelmed. And I say to Muslims that no, you should have rusukh in fil ilm, and you should have bastatan fil ilmi wal jism. You should have this sort of strength as a result of coming forth from your deep learning. And so how can we excel at academia, or how can we even excel when it comes to writing and being a scholarly person? Okay, so I want to reflect upon that, inshaAllah ta'ala. So here goes. Number one, and there's like 4 things I want to talk about. Intellectual tools and mastery of core academic skills, if you like. So success in academia begins with a mastery of certain intellectual tools, and I'm going to talk about some of them with you, inshaAllah ta'ala. So here's 2 on this slide. You don't have to worry about it because you're not going to miss much. Number 1, there's actually 3 of them. 1 is critical thinking, analytical skills. Number 2 is research methodologies, and increasingly today, digital literacy, which is very, very important. And the 3rd one, which is going to come on the next slide, which is academic writing and communication. So let's think about this one here, critical thinking and analytical skills. Now, Muslims have been doing critical thinking ever since revelation. In the Quran itself, if you look at the verbs that Allah uses, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ أَفَلَا تَتَدَبَّرُونَ, you find this in the language of the Quran, but you also find this in the examples that the Quran talks about. It uses Ibrahim ﷺ, for example, who's thinking critically. He's looking at observable data, and he's making theological insights, right? So forth and so on. So we have to have the ability of questioning assumptions. A lot of times what we do is we just assume things. But if you do mantiq really well, you realize that we actually have to also go back and challenge assumptions, right? We have to have the ability to evaluate evidence. So as madrasa graduates, or students of knowledge, when someone makes a claim or they say something, which science is that pertaining to, right? And if someone's making some sort of argument, how do you understand that argument? What kind of argument is it? And we also need to think about constructing well-reasoned arguments. So we don't get emotional. We don't start arguing like people do on these WhatsApp groups, where they just, instead of dealing with the argument, they start casting aspersions upon their character. We need to have well-reasoned arguments. And you know this already. I mean, it's not unique to academia. I'm teaching with some students, for example, usul 𝗧𝗪, and we're just in awe of how Imam 𝗧𝗪 himself does arguments. You can find this on my YouTube channel. I've done a few videos on them. Hopefully, inshallah, we can do some more. Or when we're reading, a mutun or a text like the Hidayah of Imam Marghinani, we're looking very carefully, not at just what the mas'ala is, but also the way he presents an argument, right? So yesterday, for example, with my students, we were covering a mas'ala to do with a virgin girl, and if somebody comes to her and seeks permission for marriage, someone like the wali comes, her guardian comes, and she remains silent, is that considered consent? But we're asking the question, what's really going on here? What are the fuqaha really teaching us? There's this idea that she's not been married before, she's likely to be silent, and so therefore silence is a normal disposition for her. But what if she smiles or laughs? They still consider that permission. But then Imam Marghinani later on, he separates both of these attitudes, and he doesn't tell you, but he at one place he says, well, when a person is silent, a girl is silent, virgin silent, that tells you she's happy. If she's virgin, she's silent. It's not her nature to jump for it. But why would laughing be considered as laughing or smiling? Why would we consider that to be consent? And this is he presents this separately, right? And the reason is that he's teaching you that there might be an objection here. Then what does he do? He responds. He says, well, you should know that it's obvious by thinking about it. You should think about this, and you should come to the conclusion that that's more apparent than simply saying silent. So can you see, they don't tell you these things in the text sometimes, and you just have to think about it. Why did this particular author add ascendants here and there? Why did he phrase it in a certain way? Why is the language like this? And this comes, by the way, from the Quran. When we read the Quran, we read it critically. You'll have seen, again, on YouTube, I'm doing every day at my local masjid a series on the Quran, 10 minutes every day. And I asked the question to people, why did Allah use Iqra at the beginning of the first revelation? Why did he talk about this clinging fluid? From all the examples that he could have given, right at the beginning of the Quran, Allah does this. So you have to ask yourself these questions, like, why does God do this? What's Allah really trying to tell us to do? So this is unique to academia. This is what Muslims do and have been doing. So this resonates with the Quranic imperative, this whole idea of critical thinking and having analytical skills. It resonates with the Quranic imperative, the amr, to reflect, tadabbur, and to seek understanding. So when we engage deeply with texts, whether they're classical works or even today, I've literally, before this lesson, I was reading a book by, it was a book that's just been published on jihad in Islam. And it's not written by a Muslim. It was recommended to me. I picked it up and I was literally skimming the book. Within the first 2-3 chapters, I could see he was saying certain things on assumptions. The book is actually well written. As a Muslim, I could see that he is making certain comments based on certain assumptions that he has about Islam, right? So I'm going to share that with my friend afterwards because he wants a review on it. The point I'm making is that we have to read classical texts and contemporary scholarship, but we don't take everything hook, line, and sinker. We analyze, we synthesize, and we critique ideas. So that's the first one, which is critical thinking, analytical skills. The second one, which is here, research methodologies and digital literacy, this one here, as you can see. This is also important, methodologies. And of course, I can't do it right now with you, but this is important because modern research demands that you're familiar with methodologies, range of methodologies, whether it's qualitative methods to do with questionnaires, for example, to do with interviewing people, speaking with people, or reading text, and also quantitative methods. So what are the pros and the cons of using data? And then you have references that managers that you can use, Zotero, Mendeley, these sort of types. But you also have software that you can use, mashallah. You have academic databases. Universities will usually give you free access to them. And these are very, very useful. They're really useful because they give you, especially university databases, they give you a good insight into secondary literature. But don't be, as Muslims, as ulama, bound by them. You can go back because you've been trained in Urdu, Arabic, Farsi, you've been trained in a tradition, and you can read those books for yourself. So while people have produced literature, there's nothing stopping you from going back to the sources and trying to understand it based with our tradition. Okay? And if you've got skills in classical Arabic, which you all have, alhamdulillah, right? You can get into manuscript analysis, all these things. You can get into all of these things and really produce cutting-edge research. If you're into science, you can use that to help you as well. So that's the methodologies, which I haven't given too much time to. The next one here is academic writing and communication. Really, really important. The ability to write something clearly, so I can follow your arguments, you can follow my arguments. Persuasive, so that you can persuade the reader if you want to. It's very, very powerful in academia. And again, where do you get this from? Well, of course, you can get this from reading a lot of literature, both in English and in Arabic, but you can also get this, I would argue, by reading the eloquence of our ulama, just admiring the style of writing that they do in Arabic, rhetoric, balagha, these sort of sciences, reading poetry. It's so important. I encourage advanced students to learn languages and to read those languages. So if you're reading Farsi, for example, Persian, you should be reading texts like the Karima, Sa'di, these sort of texts, because they give you a lot of insight into writing and the beauty of the style of writing. And you should read high quality, good quality literature, right? Not, books that are written for awam, but written in a way that's good quality literature. Sometimes academic writing can be very dry and boring. I completely agree with you on that. That's something that even I'm moving away from. It's very dry. But using metaphors, using similes, very rich way of writing. Imam Ghazali, for example, he does this quite a lot in his writing. When he talks about a mirror reflecting divine light, or how, Imam, Akbarian ideas, how they use different metaphors to do with Insan Kamil, or if you were to read Suhrawardi and light as a metaphor to help you understand things, right? These imaginative ways of writing to help you gain clarity over things. And so you could read these scholars to gain clarity and to get precision in your writing. If you read Usul al-Fiqh texts, they're very precise. If you read Kalam texts, they're very precise. They're very careful with the language that they use. And good scholarship does that. Of course, nowadays also, it's not just about writing books, but being able to present your knowledge to the public, whether it's for conferences, seminars, or teaching. So, I teach at Darul Ulum, and I'm teaching mostly 16 plus, 18 plus students. And I'm trying to raise their academic level when it comes to fiqh, because that's the subject we're studying with them. So this not only enhances your profile, of course, but it also raises the bar collectively as an ummah in how we communicate and how we choose our words. Shamira has asked, yeah, I can maybe prepare a list of recommended books for starting off with, or you can reach out to me. And Ruba has, can you suggest names of specific? Yeah, so there's different books. I mean, a good book to start off with, I think I mentioned it last week and last time, or I might have mentioned it in another lesson, is Mortimer Adler's book on how to read a book. Not every book is meant to be read, right? I always say this to Talaba. You're not meant to read every single book cover to cover, but you should understand how to navigate different types of books. So, for example, the book I gave about jihad, I didn't just dive into it. I read passages, I skimmed through it. If I saw an interesting section, I read through it just to give me an idea of whether I should spend my entire Sunday afternoon or evening reading that book, right? So there's a craft because we have limited time and unlimited knowledge that we can potentially acquire. Okay, so that's that. The second part of my presentation I want to focus on is navigating identity and integrating faith and scholarship. Now, when you're in academia as a Muslim, it's not a value neutral space. What do I mean by that? It's not like you can do whatever you want and everyone's ideas are welcome. There are opportunities and challenges. There's certain assumptions that Western academia is built upon. And sometimes we have to dismantle those ideas. We have to do the la ilaha, like the idea of removing these gods, if you like, before we can bring in our faith. And there are certain assumptions which are antithetical. They go against what we as Muslims believe. And so we have to be aware of that as well. And there are other certain things that are perfectly in congruence. They agree with what we believe in. So I'm going to share three with you. They're all here on this slide. Faith as motivation and ethical compass, which is one of them. I'll talk about that. Addressing challenges, Islamophobia and stereotyping, very, very common, especially for our sisters in academia, and they need a lot of support. And that leads me to a third one, which is building support networks. So let me look at the first one with you. So I don't need to tell you that for us, seeking ilm is a form of ibadah. Right? Imam Ghazali begins his 𝗬𝗨𝗪𝗔 with Kitab al-Ilm. So ilm is very, very important. And when you have a spiritual motivation, this provides resilience. And sometimes when you read Western philosophers, maybe you might read Heidegger, or you might read Immanuel Kant, or you might even read things that are satanic in nature, like it's just kufr. And you have to read it because you have to teach it, or you have to engage with it, or critically analyze it. You can get the resilience if you know why you're doing what you're doing. And if you have setbacks, you might get really bad feedback from someone, or not bad, but negative feedback from your peers. And sometimes that can be demoralizing, but you have to keep going. That's how you improve. Nobody improves just by getting everyone to agree with them. We as Muslims need to move beyond that mindset that we want to live in these bubbles where we want everybody to agree with us and say, and to massage our ego. Sometimes you need to realize and hear hard truths. But as long as we have a sense of higher purpose, this is important. But I would also say this, the ethical compass. The reason I mention ethical compass is I've met many Muslims, not just in academia, by the way, also madrasa graduates, and it's sad to say this, who are less than wanting when it comes to ethics, sadly. Whether it's to do with honesty, humility, justice, these conducts are sometimes missing. They've copied someone's work, they've plagiarized, they've got AI to do everything, or they are just not being serious about learning. They've got some funding and that's the only reason they're there. We are learning knowledge to improve civilization, to please our Creator, Jalla wa Ala. So I mentioned ethical compass. You have to be very ethical. I have sadly met many Muslims who are very, very poor when it comes to their conduct. And this obviously doesn't apply just only to academia and madrasa graduates, but as people who aspire to become scholars and leaders and thinkers, we need to have the best of akhlaq. The second challenge is here, Islamophobia and stereotyping. Academia is rife when it comes to assumptions about Islam. Orientalism is still there, alive and kicking. And if you don't believe that, you only have to watch the news and the way they dehumanize our Palestinian brothers and sisters. Where does that come from? There's a whole history behind that. So don't think that these things are innocent ideas or they're just academic ideas. They play out in how countries, how people see others. And so you do encounter prejudice, even microaggressions. I was once with an academic, and this was when I first was on my PhD journey. And I won't mention his name. He's not a Muslim. I found out things about him later on, but I was presenting early on. And one of the things that he said to me was, oh, why is it that you still teach about what happens if a rat falls into a well? Like, this is the 21st century, this is modern Britain. Now, either he was just questioning and being intrigued, or he was being it was a form of aggression. Fortunately, I understood the mas'ala, and I said it's not about the answer. In fiqh, we're not teaching students about the answer, we're teaching students how to think, and then we can get many meanings from there. And then I went through some examples, but you get this. Or somebody will say to me, how can we believe what you're saying is true because you're a Muslim? Of course, you're going to talk about Islam in positive light. Can you see the assumptions there that brown people or Muslims can never really speak about their faith authentically? But you never do that with people who write about the Bible, Christians who write about the Bible, or Jews who write about the Torah. But why are Muslims held to this particular standard? So you need to be able to set boundaries. You need to be able to defend yourself, and sometimes you need to go on the offensive. So this is very, very important. And the way you do it, the manner in which you do it is very important. You don't need to be combative, but you do need to bat it away. And the best way to bat something away is to undermine their assumptions and to know that actually this person is coming from a particular vantage point, which is usually more privileged in some way, shape, or form. So how do we respond to all of this? Well, like anything, when you're a madrasa graduate, building support networks. وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. In the Quran, we are told in various places, there's a sense of community. So, for example, I'm part of many organizations as an academic, whether that's BRACE, whether that's the trustee at Cambridge Muslim College and other places. And I always try, whenever I'm able to do so, to help students, supporting them, mentoring them. Especially those of us who are senior, we should help one another. And sisters in particular, in academia, they are particularly at risk. So they need people in the group, and they need support and so forth. Forums, groups are useful. I mean, I'm not on many WhatsApp groups because I simply don't have time for it. But regular meeting with friends and colleagues, seniors, professors who have been there for many, many years will save you a lot of heartache and pain. So the professional skills is a third one. Thriving in the academic ecosystem. So it's not just about having intellectual prowess. You need to have professional skills. One of them, I think, if I'm honest, we as Muslims need to really deal with, I'm very strict on it myself, is time management and being organized. You're not just reading books. You're going to have to teach students. You're going to have to nurture students. You're going to have to make sure projects are delivered on time. So balancing your research, teaching, all your administrative duties is a challenge. Many of you are already aware of this because you'll be running madrasas, makatib, you'll be involved in organization. And people really appreciate those people who are really well organized. So, having productivity techniques, you can use different methods, the Pomodoro method, which you can look up on, that's useful. That can help you to maintain your balance. These things are very, very useful for all of us. So I'm just giving you some examples that you can think about here, because sometimes we struggle to be really good with our time management. The second thing is I learned this from my supervisor, PhD supervisor, that just as important as your scholarly work is your ability to network. And most of us struggle to do this because we're from humble backgrounds, and we're not always told that it's not just about meritocracy, right? It's also about networks. So whether you go to conferences, joining groups, seeking mentorship, these will open up new opportunities. That's how you get your name out. Before I was in academia, I used to work for a consultancy firm. Alhamdulillah, I was quite good at my job. I was a very good consultant. I delivered things on time. Excellent. But what I struggled was networking, because unlike my colleagues who on a Friday night would go out for a drink to the bar, I would go home. And what I really found out quickly was that's actually where things happen, because people get to know you. I'm not saying that you go to the bar, by the way, or to the pub. What I'm saying is that finding ways to network and being connected to people is very, very important. You never know where a particular relationship, where a particular network can help you. And I found this very, very useful in my life. And by the way, Muslims have been doing this for centuries. You can read books on how, ulama got to know one another, and that opened up opportunities for them. So networking is very, very important, and doing things with other people is very, very important. C here is, again, career planning and adaptability. So you need to understand how the world is moving very, very fast. Expectations especially in the way academia is at the moment, especially in Britain, it's very volatile. So always have other skills that you can fall back on. So if things don't work out, and I always say to ulama and friends and colleagues that have different skill sets. So you have different sources of income. If one thing doesn't work out, you can always go to something else. If you're having a bad patch in one area, you can move on to something else. So become really versatile in the modern era in particular. Don't be stuck with sort of one trajectory in life. Flexibility, openness, working in policy, working for government in other organizations, community engagement, whatever it might be, open up your horizons. Get a rich repertoire, a breadth of experience. That's very, very useful, especially in this day and age. And part of the problem is that when we go to school now, people are told to go down certain career paths, but those careers might not be here in 10 years' time. When my father and your father, grandfathers, they were in a profession, they were usually in that profession for life. That world doesn't really exist anymore. Okay, so being flexible is very, very important. Right, let me move on to number 4 here, which is, I think, just as important, which is personal well-being. I've met so many people, Muslims and non-Muslims, who are overwhelmed, and they get tired, they get burnt out, they're doing too much. I met so many imams and ulama. I did a 5-year research on imams. Poor men are doing so much, they're getting burnt out. So you need to look after yourself, right? Look after number 1. Because, if you can't take care of yourself, you're going to struggle with other people. You're going to get burnt out. You're going to get really tired. So there's 3 things that I will mention here, and there could be more, but I'm going to keep it at 3. So any scholarly life, whether it's an imam, scholarship, writing, researching, is very, very demanding. I get a lot of people ringing me for help on this, that, the other. And taking care of yourself is very important. So, going to the gym, playing football, going out, having days off, like on a Saturday after I finish teaching at 12 o'clock, I don't open a kitab until Saturday evening because I just want to relax with my family. So all of this is really important for your personal well-being. Even Balagh, when they asked me to teach on a Saturday, I maintained that space. I was like, look, from 2 till nighttime, I'm not doing anything for anybody because that's my family time. I don't see my children, my wife as much during the week because we're very busy. This is family time. So having things like that are very, very important. I'm being strict with that. But 3 things here that I want to mention. Spiritual resilience, very, very important. Sometimes we can get lost in scholarly work, and sometimes the more knowledge you learn, there's a risk that pride, arrogance, kibr, these sort of spiritual maladies can come in. So praying, Quran, awrad, having connection with the ulama, being connected with your community, doing things in your community is very, very important. And it helps you manage your stress, and it also gives you a sense of peace. And remember, whatever happens in the world, as you know, it's from the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you will always have pressures on you, but you've got to learn the way to manage them. And one of the things that I always tell ulama and colleagues is that you need to learn the art of delegation. We can't put out all the world's fires. We really can't. But if you can delegate people, train people, give them the skill to do it, then that will make life easy for you. The second thing, mental health awareness. I've called it mental health and awareness, but you could change the phrasing. But a lot of people struggle. A lot of people get overwhelmed. It's a big problem in our community. So this really, really helps. And we should try and offer opportunities where we can also learn from other people's experiences. Universities now do offer counseling. A lot of places do, but it's very secular. So just be aware of that. But the way to do it is, look, exercise. Go to the gym once a day, twice a day. Very, very important. I go to the gym. I literally have my headphones on. If you see me, I have a hoodie on. I don't talk to anybody, but I just go in between. I have a routine, usually after Dhuhr. and I just go for gym for 1 hour, and I just, let it all out. I used to play football. That helped me. Then in the evening, when my kids are at home, from 7 o'clock till 9 o'clock, I'm with my girls. My phone's not with me. I'm not doing anything. Because you have to be healthy. You have to be present with your family too. So this will all work wonders for your mental health. Having a good routine, not watching and listening to stuff that's going to digress. Having a good tartib, write it down, waking up 4 o'clock in the morning, perhaps going to sleep early, having 2-3 hours blocks of writing with 50 minutes writing time, 50 minutes writing, 10-minute break, 15-minute writing, 10-minute break, fajr, etc. You get the idea. I also think work-life balance and self-care, which I've also talked about, is very, very important. Setting boundaries. Learn the art of saying no to people. Everybody wants your time. Everybody wants a piece of you. Learn the art of prioritizing, and also put care of the self in your daily routine, where you just rest, maybe go for a walk, maybe do some gardening. These are very, very important, very, very important, as you get older especially. And it's also good to have friends outside of the scholarly bubble. So sometimes, I hear about ulama being sort of like trapped in little bubbles. But, sometimes get to know people outside of your bubbles, right? We do have some ulama who kind of live very aloof lives, but really ulama should be among the people, right? Not as in becoming like them, but you should live with them to see what community is really like. And family is really important. So on a Friday in our household, in our family, we all go to my mom's. Friday evening, everybody's at my parents' house. We just have, we have a meal there and we're all together. Very, very important for your mental well-being. Sunday night, for example, this evening, I'll switch off. I'll do some praying. I'll do my own stuff. I'll just switch off from any other distractions. So your academic success, your scholarly success, is also built upon your relationship with other people. So very, very important. And a lot of people struggle with this. Right, so the final slide. What is all this about? What is the samara? What is the end conclusion? And this is me reading, years of Shah Waliullah Dehlawi, Ibn Taymiyyah, the scholars of Deoband, Maulana Rashid Ahmad Gangohi, Maulana Qasim Nanotmi, Maulana Sharif Tanwi, and just good friends and good mashayikh, that we are contributing to the understanding of Islam in the world today, and to making Islam a civilizational force. We have a rich legacy of scholarship, but we are not bound to the past. We don't live in the past, we lived in the moment. And we use the history, we use our scholarly works to make the world a better place today. We have an opportunity in many parts to build on our heritage, contribute to knowledge systems of ethics and morality, which our fiqh talks about, which our tasawwuf talks about, right? And a common good. Practicing it and talking about it and teaching it to people. Remember, we're not a ثقافة الكلامية. The famous Moroccan philosopher, Sheikh Taha Abdul Rahman, he has a number of books which you should read, but he talks about the idea that in Western understanding knowledge systems, it's very like theorization and talk a lot. Islam is about it's about amal, ثقافة العملية. We are people who do things, who actually act in the world, right? What use is it having billions of pounds running a department in America, for example, the John F. Kennedy Center for Peace Studies, when you can't talk about a conflict in Palestine, right? What use is it? What use is all that books and all that knowledge if you can't do anything with it, right? Whereas for us, it's like we have to do something with it. And so we excel not individually also, but also by mentoring and doing nusra of other people. Remember, our scholarship in Islam is about challenging dhulm, injustice, and promoting ethical scholarship. This is what Islam is really about when it comes to its knowledge systems. So I'll end there, inshaAllah ta'ala. I do have to go to teach in about 10 minutes. But I want to, first and foremost, thank you all for being here. I hope you found it useful. And these are just my own insights. There's a lot more that I could have said, but I wanted to keep it concise and practical at the same time. So I'll end there, and we might have a few minutes to take questions. I'll just go through the chat box just to see if I need to answer any of the questions I haven't answered already. Sheikh Abdullah, I think I've responded to your question. Anas, whatever you learn, Yeah, I mean, what you learn in Dars in Islam is limited. But if you learn it well, it will give you the platform to launch into other journeys. Reading list, Shamir has asked, we talked about that. Specific books that you can read, I talked about that. How do you get in contact with you? So I think they've shared my email address. Okay, that will be shared. Abdullah asks, how do I develop my post Alimiyyah? One of the best ways is to sit with people who push you. Sit with people who push you and really make you feel uncomfortable. If you sit with people who just say, yeah, lovely, amazing, wah, wah, that won't push you. If you sit, like you should obviously help awam, society, but if you want to develop a scholar, you need to sit with real scholars. Sit around people who are really interested in knowledge, and you'll know them when you meet them. Right? They're not interested in getting fans or followers, but they're more interested in pursuing truth. The YouTube channel, Sajida, is if you just type in my name, Haroon Sidat, you'll find it there. Try to keep it busy. It's quite demanding, but you'll find content on there. Okay. You're welcome anytime. Always happy to help. Iram has a question about networking and collaboration. But being female, I struggle also for if you deliver talk and don't feel composing myself. So being female, I struggle a lot. I struggle also for that. If you deliver talk and I don't feel comfortable posting myself. So you have to have a position, right? You have to have a theory or a position on photography. So I have my own position on photography, but I also respect people who disagree with me on it. I don't get involved in arguments. I've written my own. I've justified it to myself. I've read it. I've done some research. But it also depends because I'm in academia. So there also needs to be images of me on university websites. But I also feel like for me, as a man, a Muslim man, bearded Muslim man, I need to represent my faith in these spaces because if I don't, other people are misrepresenting my faith. And for women, yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to play down the challenges that women have, Muslim women have. Okay, my dad called me. I'm not going to play down the challenges that Muslim women have. I mean, it is a challenge. And so one of the ways you might want to do that is through the scholars' wives, keep in touch with them. So there's a sort of parda, if you like, or keeping it formal, emails, whatever, that can help as well. So the sisters do have a slight challenge. I completely agree with you. And there has to be that respect and between the genders, but it's got to be done in a respectful way. So the boundaries have to be absolutely clear. But what I would say to our sisters is don't let the privilege the men have hold you back, right? Find sisters who are similar minded and create your own little network of scholarship and maybe have one or two ulama who can help you as well, where it's done in a dignified way. So sisters have a lot of potential, huge amount of potential. But I do agree that there is a slight disadvantage that they sometimes have to feel. Allah make it easy for all of you. Okay, you've got my email address. When running a madrasa, it'd be one's very different to face my contemporary issues. Yeah, so you need to. I mean, you're busy as well. You have a madrasa, you have a maktab to run, so sometimes you can't always do academic research. You have to rely on people like me or others who can do some research for you or who can help guide you. It's a complex world that we live in, and people have complex needs. You can reach out, and we can think through these things. And remember, Islam has to be practical. Islam is sustained. One of my teachers said something to the effect: Islam is sustained by the way it makes people's lives practical, right? It works for them. Yeah, it's very hard to get a job in academia, full-time job. It's very demanding, honest, very, very demanding, especially at the moment. Very, very demanding. But you can become an academic in your own way, right? Write things, research, publish them. There are many ulama, graduates who are not in academia, but they've, mashallah, done well outside of academia. There are many like that, mashallah. It's not necessary. So my email address is available there. You can email me. Barakallah fikum. I don't think I'll be with you next week, but I hope you will attend next week and have a lovely time. I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. I'm always happy to help what I can, inshallah ta'ala. Barakallah fikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.